She had one wish before she died, to meet Elvis. When he walked into the room, she smiled through her tears. But it was what he whispered to her that left her family crying for weeks. In this video, you'll hear the story behind that moment, and why it still breaks hearts decades later. A family drove through the night to reach Memphis, racing against time itself. They packed their car in darkness, loading it with pillows and blankets for their daughter, who was too weak to help but determined to make this journey. Sarah had been fighting leukemia for 2 years, and her doctors had told the family the disease was terminal and time was limited. Sarah had one wish that kept burning inside her. She wanted to meet Elvis Presley. Her bedroom walls were covered with his posters, and during her worst treatment days, when the nausea was unbearable and the pain shot through her bones, her mother would play Elvis records beside her hospital bed. Love Me Tender, Can't Help, Falling in Love, and gospel songs like He Knows, Just What I Need helped Sarah through the darkest hours. Her parents had saved every penny they could over the past year, money they had planned to use for Sarah's future. Now, they made the hardest decision of their lives. They would spend their last savings on this trip to Memphis, where Elvis was performing. The drive began before dawn. Sarah lay across the back seat, wrapped in her favorite blanket with Elvis's face printed on it. Every hour she seemed to get weaker. By the time they reached Tennessee, she could barely sit up. Her father kept checking the rearview mirror, watching his daughter fade before his eyes. Her mother held Sarah's hand and whispered encouragements, but inside she was terrified they might not make it in time. When they finally reached Memphis that afternoon, reality hit them hard. They had no plan beyond showing up at the concert venue. They had no connections, no contacts, no way to actually reach Elvis. Sarah's mother had imagined they could somehow get backstage, but now she realized how impossible that sounded. Elvis Presley was one of the most famous people in the world. You couldn't just walk up and ask to meet him. Desperation drove her to action. She found a payphone outside their motel and started making calls. She called radio stations, newspapers, and the concert venue box office. Most people hung up on her or transferred her to someone else who couldn't help. Her voice cracked as she told Sarah's story over and over again. Then something amazing happened. A sympathetic radio staffer listened to her entire story. He had a daughter about Sarah's age. He told her he couldn't make any promises, but he knew some people in Elvis's organization. He would make some calls and see what he could do. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. That evening, as they prepared for the concert, none of them knew they were about to face something even more challenging than the journey itself. Having reached Memphis didn't mean anything yet. They still had to navigate the fortress of security and gatekeepers whose entire job was keeping fans away from the king. The concert venue's security system created multiple barriers between fans and Elvis. By the mid-1970s, Elvis was typically surrounded by layers of management and security that made direct fan contact difficult. Getting past all these barriers seemed impossible for a family with no connections. The family arrived at the Mid-South Coliseum 3 hours before showtime, with no guarantee their request had reached anyone important. The radio DJ's promise to make calls felt distant now as they stood outside the massive concrete building. Thousands of fans were already gathering, many carrying signs and gifts they hoped to give Elvis. Security guards in yellow jackets stood at every entrance, checking tickets and turning away anyone who looked like they might cause trouble. Sarah's mother took a deep breath and approached the first security guard she saw. She explained about Sarah's condition, about their journey to Memphis, about their daughter's final wish. The guard listened politely but shook his head. He suggested they write a letter to Elvis's fan club. She tried the next guard with the same result, then another. Each rejection felt like a door slamming shut on Sarah's last hope. Sarah's father wheeled her in the borrowed wheelchair they had gotten from their motel. She was so weak now that standing for more than a few minutes exhausted her. Her mother continued approaching ushers, ticket takers, anyone wearing an official badge. Most gave her sympathetic looks but explained they had no way to contact Elvis's people. Some didn't even stop walking. A few were openly rude, telling her that hundreds of people claimed to have sick relatives just to get backstage. With each dismissive response, the family's exhaustion grew heavier. Then Sarah's mother spotted a sympathetic guard standing alone near the loading dock. He was older than the others, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes. She approached him with what felt like her 100th attempt of the day. She started telling Sarah's story again, her voice cracking with exhaustion and desperation. The guard listened carefully. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her something that gave her hope. He understood what families like theirs were going through. He promised he would get their message to someone who could actually help, but he warned them not to get their hopes up. Elvis received hundreds of similar requests every week. The guard disappeared into the building for 20 minutes. When he came back, his expression was unreadable. He told them to keep their tickets and find their seats for the show. Someone would find them if there was any news. That was all he could say. The family spent the next hour in emotional turmoil. They prepared themselves for disappointment while clinging to the smallest thread of hope. Sarah seemed to understand that this might be her only chance to hear Elvis sing, even from a distance. She asked her parents to help her put on her favorite dress, the blue one with small flowers that she had worn to church before she got too sick to attend. As the opening act took the stage, a young woman in a staff uniform approached their seats. She leaned down and whispered something to Sarah's mother that made her gasp. A member of staff had returned and said they'd pass the request on. The family was told to remain at their seats after the show. The next 2 hours would feel like the longest of their lives as they sat through the entire concert. What they didn't know was that backstage, Elvis was already learning about their story and preparing to make a decision that would reveal something deeply personal about the king himself. Elvis had experienced loss in his own life and was often moved when fans faced tragedy. This personal understanding of grief would shape everything about the meeting that was about to take place. Backstage at the Mid-South Coliseum, Elvis sat in his dressing room after finishing his second show of the evening. Sweat still dripped from his forehead as he toweled off and changed out of his white jumpsuit. He was exhausted. The performance had taken everything out of him, and all he wanted was to get back to Graceland for some rest. Then his road manager knocked on the door with news about Sarah's family. The manager explained Sarah's situation carefully. A 16-year-old girl with leukemia, weeks to live. Her family had made the journey to Memphis just for the chance to meet Elvis. The staff had handled hundreds of similar requests over the years, usually offering signed photos or brief meet and greets. But something in Elvis's expression changed as he listened to the details. He asked to hear the girl's age again. 16, the same age Elvis had been when he first walked into Sun Records. Despite his exhaustion after the 2-hour performance, Elvis insisted on meeting Sarah personally rather than just signing an autograph. His manager suggested they could send over a signed photo and maybe a scarf from the show. Elvis shook his head. This required more than that. He told his manager to bring the family backstage after the arena cleared out. Elvis's own experiences with loss had taught him how fragile life could be. The death of his beloved mother Gladys when he was 23 had devastated him completely. Friends said he cried for days and never fully recovered from that grief. These experiences shaped his deep empathy for families facing tragedy. Elvis had seen what death did to the people left behind. When fans reached out to him during their darkest moments, Elvis felt a responsibility to respond with more than just celebrity courtesy. Elvis asked for privacy and time, and he wanted the meeting to feel personal rather than staged. He gave specific instructions about how the meeting should be handled with dignity. Clear the dressing room of everyone except essential people. Make sure the family had privacy. Most importantly, give them as much time as they needed. Elvis didn't want this to feel rushed or staged like so many other backstage encounters. As Elvis prepared himself emotionally for this encounter, he asked about Sarah's favorite songs. Her mother had mentioned that Sarah played Elvis records during her treatments. Love Me Tender was apparently her favorite. Elvis nodded and made a mental note. He also asked if there were any specific things Sarah wanted to know or talk about. Even the king felt the weight of this moment. Elvis had performed for presidents and royalty, but meeting a dying fan created a different kind of pressure. What do you say to a 16-year-old girl who knows she's dying? How do you bring comfort to parents who are about to lose their child? Elvis sat quietly for several minutes, gathering his thoughts and trying to find the right approach. Elvis made one final decision that surprised even his closest associates. He insisted that his dressing room be cleared of everyone except Sarah's immediate family. No photographers, no other staff members, no entourage hanging around in the background. This moment belonged to Sarah and her parents alone. 20 minutes later, Elvis opened his dressing room door. What happened in the next few minutes would create a memory so powerful that it would sustain this family through their darkest days ahead. Sarah entered the dressing room so weak she could barely stand, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw Elvis. The dressing room felt completely different from the chaos outside. Gone were the screaming fans and flashing cameras. Soft lighting created a warm, quiet atmosphere. A few chairs sat arranged in a circle. Elvis had changed out of his jumpsuit into simple black pants and a white shirt. Sarah sat in the wheelchair her father pushed, wrapped in her Elvis blanket. Her parents stood behind her, uncertain what to do with their hands. Everyone realized the gravity of the moment they were sharing. This wasn't a typical meet and greet with excited fans asking for autographs. Death hung in the air like an uninvited guest. Elvis looked at Sarah's thin frame and hollow cheeks. Her mother watched Elvis study her daughter's condition. Her father shifted nervously from foot to foot. Sarah simply stared at Elvis with wonder, as if she couldn't believe he was real. Elvis broke the tension by sitting down on a low stool so he could be at Sarah's eye level. His voice was soft and gentle when he spoke. He told Sarah he had heard about her long trip to Memphis. He asked if the drive had been too hard on her. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper when she answered, but Elvis leaned forward to catch every word. He didn't rush her or fill the silence with nervous chatter. Their conversation started with music. Elvis asked about her favorite songs. Sarah mentioned Love Me Tender and how it helped her through the worst treatment days. Elvis nodded and said that song had always meant something special to him too. He asked about her dreams, what she wanted to do when she got better. Sarah's answer surprised everyone. She said she didn't think about getting better anymore, but she dreamed about not being afraid. She worried about her parents and how they would handle what was coming. Elvis listened to every word without trying to offer false hope or empty promises. When Sarah talked about her fears, he didn't tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he acknowledged how scary it must be for someone so young. He shared that he had lost people he loved and understood that fear of the unknown. His honesty created a connection that went deeper than celebrity worship. After 20 minutes of conversation, Elvis did something unexpected. He asked Sarah's parents if he could speak to their daughter privately for just a moment. The parents hesitated, but Sarah nodded that it was okay. Her mother and father stepped outside the dressing room, leaving Elvis alone with their daughter. Elvis moved his chair closer to Sarah's wheelchair. He leaned in so close that his forehead almost touched hers. What he whispered was meant for Sarah alone, and lasted only about 30 seconds. But those private words would change everything for this family. Sarah's immediate reaction told everyone that something profound had happened. Tears streamed down her face, but she also wore the most peaceful smile her parents had seen in months. She looked up at Elvis with an expression of pure gratitude mixed with something else. Relief, maybe, or acceptance. Elvis gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his hand. When her parents returned to the room, Sarah asked to share what Elvis had whispered to her. According to the family's account, Elvis had spoken to her about heaven and finding peace. The family later said his words gave Sarah comfort about dying and eased her deepest fears about what came next. Those simple words carried a power that no one in that room had expected. The impact on everyone present was immediate and lasting. But what happened after they left that dressing room would prove even more remarkable than the meeting itself. Sarah lived for several more weeks after that meeting, and according to her mother, they were the most peaceful weeks of her entire illness. The drive back to Alabama was completely different from their frantic trip to Memphis. Sarah sat up in the back seat for most of the journey, talking about every detail of meeting Elvis. She seemed energized in a way her parents hadn't seen in months. Her mother kept glancing in the rearview mirror, amazed at the change in her daughter's whole attitude. Sarah no longer complained about the pain or asked when they would reach the next rest stop. She just smiled and hummed Elvis songs. When they arrived home, something had shifted in Sarah's approach to her illness. She stopped fighting her treatments and found acceptance in a way that puzzled her parents at first. For months, Sarah had been angry about her situation. She had thrown medicine bottles and refused to eat. She had screamed at doctors and cried herself to sleep every night. Now, she took her medications without complaint and ate whatever her mother prepared for her. Her parents initially felt confused about why Sarah seemed so calm about dying. They worried that meeting Elvis had somehow made her give up hope. But Sarah explained that she wasn't giving up. She had found peace with what was coming. According to the family, Elvis's words had given her something to look forward to instead of just something to fear. She believed now that death wasn't the end of everything. Sarah shared what Elvis had told her with extended family members who came to visit. Her grandmother wept when she heard about the conversation. Her uncle, who had never been religious, said the story gave him chills. Sarah's younger brother asked if she really believed what Elvis had promised her. Sarah nodded with complete certainty. Word spread quickly through their small town. Neighbors, former classmates, and church members came to visit, and each retelling seemed to bring comfort, not just to Sarah, but to other families dealing with their own tragedies. The story carried a power that reached beyond one family's grief. Sarah's mother decided she had to write to Elvis to thank him for what he had given their family. She sat at her kitchen table one evening and composed a letter explaining how much his words meant to Sarah and to all of them. She mailed it to Graceland, not knowing if Elvis would ever see it. The family later said they heard back and felt grateful for his continued kindness. Sarah's final days were marked by an unusual tranquility. She spent hours listening to Elvis records, sometimes singing along in her weak voice. She talked about her hopes for what came next and asked her parents not to be too sad when she was gone. She reminded them of what Elvis had promised about being together again someday. When Sarah passed away, her mother said she died peacefully with Love Me Tender playing softly in the background. The family said the experience changed how they thought about faith and grief. They kept Sarah's room exactly as she had left it, with Elvis posters still covering every wall. Her mother revealed that she still plays Elvis's music when she visits Sarah's grave, believing they're together somewhere beyond what anyone can see. This encounter revealed something profound about Elvis's character that went far beyond his fame and musical talent. But what makes this story even more remarkable is that it wasn't unique. Stories like Sarah's represent one of many accounts shared by fans and families over the years. Elvis often met with people facing tragedy, usually keeping these encounters private out of respect for the families involved. Each time, he brought genuine compassion to moments when it mattered most. Sarah's journey to Memphis follows the classic pattern of a hero seeking help from a wise mentor. Elvis offered her something more valuable than an autograph. He gave her peace about what lay ahead. In that quiet dressing room, a dying girl found her elixir of comfort from the king himself. True greatness isn't measured in record sales or fame, but in moments of genuine human compassion when cameras aren't rolling. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your own memories of Elvis or similar stories of unexpected kindness in the comments below. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion leave the biggest legacy.